5 years have passed since that fateful day when the police raided Malam Osman's Suya spot, revealing the horrifying truth about the myth that had captivated the town. 5 years after Malam Osman was sentenced to life imprisonment, his dreams of wealth turned to dust. 5 years since Chief Udu vanished, taking with him his dark secrets and leaving behind a mansion of ashes. The town had slowly begun to heal. The whispers had quieted. The nightmares had become less frequent. But the wound was still there, a scar that would never fully fade, a reminder of the darkness that had once touched their lives. Malam Osman sat in his prison cell, a shadow of the man he once was. His eyes, once bright with ambition, now stared vacantly at the prison walls. His hair had turned grey, not from age but from the weight of his sins. Every night, he was haunted by the faces of those he had deceived, those who had unknowingly consumed the flesh he had prepared. "I was a fool," he would whisper to himself in the darkness of his cell. A fool blinded by greed. The prison chaplain, a kind old man named Pastor Emmanuel, had taken an interest in Malam Osman. He visited him regularly, offering not judgment but a chance at redemption. "Your life is not over, my son," Pastor Emmanuel would say. "Even in this place, even after what you have done, you can still find peace." At first, Malam Osman had scoffed at the pastor's words. What peace could there be for a man who had committed such atrocities? But as the months turned into years, something began to change within him. The seed of remorse, planted on the day of his arrest, had begun to grow, nurtured by the pastor's unwavering kindness. My dear friends, gather around once more, for the tale I am about to tell you is not just a continuation of a story, but a testament to the fact that no matter how far evil runs, justice will always find its way. The last time we met, I told you the horrifying tale of Mallam Usman, the gateman whose greed led him to sell human flesh as Suya, and Chief Udu, the wealthy politician whose dark ambitions poisoned an entire community. Many of you asked, what happened to Chief Udu? Did he escape justice forever? Did the community ever heal from such betrayal? Well, my friends, settle in, for tonight I will answer these questions and more. The story of Chief Udu did not end with his disappearance into the shadows. No, it was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with twists and turns that will leave you speechless. Far from the prison walls, in a luxurious estate in a foreign land, Chief Udu had reinvented himself. He now called himself Chief Solomon, a wealthy Nigerian businessman who had made his fortune in international trade. He had chosen Ghana as his new home, a place where his money spoke louder than his past. His estate was a testament to his wealth and power, sprawling gardens, marble floors, a pool that glimmered like a sapphire under the African sun. He had servants who catered to his every whim, politicians who accepted his generous donations, and a fleet of luxury cars that whispered of his status to anyone who cared to listen. Chief Udu had not just escaped justice, he had thrived in its absence. His business, legitimate on paper but built on the foundation of his ill-gotten wealth, had connections throughout West Africa. He hosted lavish parties that lasted until dawn, surrounded himself with beautiful women, and lived as if the horror he had left behind in Nigeria had never existed. The past is dead, he would say, raising a glass of expensive champagne to his guest. Only the future matters. But the past, my friends, is never truly dead. It sleeps, it waits, and when the time is right, it rises to claim its due. In Lagos, a private detective named Ojo Paul sat in his modest office, staring at the photograph of a smiling woman. Lola, his wife of 15 years, had been one of Chief Udu's victims. She had stopped at Malam Osman's Suya spot on her way home from work, a simple decision that had cost her her life. Her body had never been found, but the evidence uncovered during the investigation had confirmed that she had been one of the many used to supply the infamous Suya business. Ojo had been a police officer then, one of the team that had raided Malam Osman's shop. The discovery had broken him, turned his world upside down. He had left the force, unable to continue after such a personal tragedy, and had set up as a private detective with one obsession: Finding Chief Udu. For 5 years, he had followed every lead, chased every rumor, and spent every spare naira on his search. Countless nights he had lain awake, haunted by images of his wife's final moments, wondering if he would ever find the man responsible. Just when despair threatened to consume him completely, a mysterious envelope appeared at his office with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from Ghana and a handwritten note: "The monster has a new name." The article featured a photo of a lavish party hosted by Chief Solomon, a Nigerian businessman who had seemingly appeared from nowhere 2 years ago with inexplicable wealth and powerful connections. Ojo's hands trembled as he studied the grainy image. Though the man wore expensive sunglasses and had changed his appearance, there was something in the tilt of his head, the curve of his smile that sent ice through Ojo's veins. Could it be? After all these years? "Chief Solomon," Ojo whispered, tracing the face in the photograph. "I found you at last." But what now? He couldn't go to the authorities yet, not without proof. Chief Udu had friends in high places, both in Nigeria and abroad. Without irrefutable evidence, any accusation would be dismissed, and Chief Udu would simply disappear again, perhaps forever this time. No, Ojo needed something that could not be ignored, something that would make extradition inevitable. He needed someone on the inside, someone who could get close to Chief Udu and gather the evidence required to bring him down. But who would be brave enough or foolish enough to walk into the lion's den? The answer came 3 days later when his office door opened to reveal a woman he hadn't seen in years. Aniko stood in the doorway, her eyes reflecting a pain that mirrored his own. "I heard you found him," she said without preamble. "I want in." Annie's brother had been one of Chief Udu's victims. She had been a law student when tragedy struck her family. The loss had nearly destroyed her, but instead of breaking, she had channeled her grief into her studies, graduating at the top of her class and joining the International Police Task Force specializing in cross-border criminal activities. When Ojo explained his plan, Annie's face hardened with resolve. "I've been preparing for this moment for 5 years," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes." What Ojo didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Annie had secrets of her own. Secrets that would either ensure their success or doom them both. The plan they crafted was as dangerous as it was desperate. Annie would pose as a wealthy Nigerian businesswoman interested in investing in Ghana. She would infiltrate Chief Udu's social circle, gain his trust, and collect the evidence needed to prove his true identity and his connection to the crimes that had shocked Nigeria 5 years earlier. They spent weeks preparing, creating a convincing backstory, falsifying business credentials, securing the right clothes and accessories to sell the illusion of wealth. But all their planning couldn't eliminate the terrible risk. If Chief Udu recognized her, if he suspected even for a moment. "Be careful," Ojo warned as they stood at the airport, the final moment before Annie would step into a world of deadly deception. "This man is not just evil, he's clever. He's evaded justice for 5 years for a reason." Annie's smile was cold, a glimpse of something dangerous beneath her carefully cultivated exterior. "So am I, Mr. Paul. So am I." As her plane took off, carrying her toward the monster who had destroyed both their lives, Ojo couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her disappear forever. What if he had just sent another innocent person to their death? In Ghana, Chief Udu was preparing for another of his famous parties. His compound buzzed with activity as servants polished silverware, arranged flowers, and prepared food for the hundreds of guests expected to attend. Chief Udu himself stood on his balcony, surveying his domain with the satisfaction of a man who believed himself untouchable. Yet despite all his wealth, despite all his power, he still glanced over his shoulder from time to time, haunted by ghosts from his past. Tonight, however, would be different. Tonight, he would push aside those nagging whispers of paranoia and enjoy the fruits of his escape. "Sir," his assistant said, approaching with a clipboard, "there's a late addition to the guest list. A Nigerian businesswoman, Aniko." She is new to Ghana, looking for investment opportunities. Several of your associates recommended that she meet you. At the mention of Nigerian, Chief Udu's body tensed. His eyes narrowed, suspicion darkening his features. He was always cautious about new people, especially those from Nigeria. Nigeria meant danger. Nigeria meant the past he had fled. Show me her information, he demanded, extending his hand for the clipboard. He studied the details carefully, her business credentials, her references, the companies she had worked with. Everything seemed in order. Too perfect, perhaps. Or was that just his paranoia speaking again? Very well, he said finally, returning the clipboard. Make sure she's properly welcomed. And have Kwame watch her. Discreetly. That evening, as the party reached its peak, Chief Udu's security chief whispered in his ear, "The Nigerian woman is by the fountain, sir. She's been there for 20 minutes. Hasn't spoken to many people." Chief Udu nodded, his curiosity piqued. He made his way through the crowd, observing her from a distance before approaching. She was striking, tall, elegant, with a quiet confidence that set her apart from the other guests who laughed too loudly and drank too much. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Miss Cole, I presume," he said, approaching her with the practiced charm that had served him well over the years. She turned, and for a moment, just a moment, he thought he saw something in her eyes, something cold and calculating. But then she smiled, and the impression vanished so completely he wondered if he had imagined it. "Chief Solomon," she replied, extending her hand. "Your reputation precedes you. I'm honored to be invited to your home." "The honor is mine," he said, taking her hand. "Any friend of my associates is a friend of mine. Tell me, what brings you to Ghana?" As Annie spoke of business opportunities and investments, Chief Udu found himself intrigued despite his initial suspicion. She was knowledgeable, articulate, and, most appealingly, seemed impressed by his wealth and influence. There was something in the way she listened to him, as if hanging on his every word, that stroked his ego in just the right way. By the end of the evening, he had invited her to a private dinner the following night. As he watched her leave, he called over his security chief. "What did you make of her?" he asked. "She seems legitimate, sir." But what? "I would still advise caution. Something about her feels practiced." Chief Udu nodded slowly. "Continue watching her. I want to know everything she does in Ghana. Who she meets, where she goes, what she says when I'm not around." Little did he know that back in her hotel room, Annie was making a secure call to Lagos. She whispered, her hands shaking now that she was alone. "He suspects nothing." "Be careful," Ojo's voice crackled through the encrypted line. "He's inviting you closer because he's either interested or suspicious." "Either way," Annie replied, "it's working." "But Ojo, when I saw him, when I was face to face with the man who..." Her voice broke. "Stay focused," Ojo said firmly. "We'll have justice. Just stick to the plan." After hanging up, Annie sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. What she hadn't told Ojo was that Chief Udu had touched her hand, looked into her eyes, and shown not even a flicker of recognition. How could a man forget the faces of those whose lives he had destroyed? How could he sleep at night, party, laugh, as if none of it had happened? Tomorrow's dinner would bring her one step closer to answering these questions. One step closer to justice. One step closer to danger. Over the weeks that followed, Annie became a fixture in Chief Udu's life. She was everything he desired in a companion, beautiful, intelligent, and seemingly in awe of his accomplishments. Each day, she walked a dangerous tightrope between getting closer to him and maintaining her disguise. There were moments of heart-stopping fear, like when one of Chief Udu's business associates mentioned visiting Lagos recently. "Perhaps you crossed paths with my brother there," the man said to Annie at a dinner party. Chief Udu's eyes had locked onto her, watching for her reaction. Her calm response about rarely visiting that part of the city seemed to satisfy him, but that night she couldn't sleep, wondering if her cover was beginning to crack. Despite these close calls, Chief Udu began to let his guard down. His ego, his greatest weakness, couldn't resist the admiration Annie so convincingly displayed. He began to speak more freely about his past in Nigeria, about the business ventures that had made him wealthy, and about the people he had left behind. They were fools, he told her one night, his tongue loosened by expensive whiskey and the false security of her admiration. They sat alone on his private terrace, the lights of Accra twinkling below them like fallen stars. They thought they could bring me down, but I was always one step ahead. Annie leaned closer, her eyes wide with faint fascination. The recording device hidden in her bracelet captured every word. "Tell me more," she urged. "How did you outwit them?" And he did, my friends. Drunk on ego and alcohol, Chief Udu revealed details of his escape from Nigeria, of the officials he had bribed, of the new identity he had created. As he spoke, Annie forced herself to smile, to nod, to play the role of the impressed admirer, while inside her stomach churned with disgust. Then came the moment that nearly shattered her composure. "There was this special business I had," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A Suya spot. But not just any Suya." He laughed, a sound that sent ice through Annie's veins. "When the fools found out what they had been eating, their faces." He laughed again, harder this time. "Can you imagine their horror when they realized?" Annie's hand tightened around her glass. Her brother's face flashed before her eyes. With every fiber of her being, she wanted to grab the knife from the fruit platter and plunge it into his heart. Instead, she forced a smile, forced herself to laugh along with him. "You're wicked," she said, making it sound like admiration rather than the accusation it truly was. "Tell me everything." What Chief Udu didn't know was that every word was being recorded, every confession saved as evidence against him. Annie had become his confidant, his lover, the woman he believed would share his life of luxury. In reality, she was the architect of his downfall. For 3 agonizing months, she played her role perfectly. By day, she gathered evidence, copying financial records when he wasn't looking, planting bugs in his office, earning the trust of his staff who shared rumors and stories. By night, she endured his touch, his kisses, his whispered confidences, all while imagining the moment justice would finally be served. There were times the strain almost broke her. Nights when, alone in the bathroom of his mansion, she would silently sob, washing herself again and again as if to remove the taint of his presence. But then she would remember her brother, remember Ojo's wife, remember all the innocents who had suffered, and her resolve would harden once more. Finally, after a particularly revealing night when Chief Udu, celebrating a successful business deal, had spoken openly about his crimes, Annie made the call she had been waiting for. "We have him," she told Ojo during one of their secure calls, her voice tight with emotion. "It's time." But as she hung up the phone, a sound behind her made her blood run cold. She turned slowly to find Chief Udu's security chief standing in the doorway of her room, his face expressionless, his hand resting on his holstered gun. "The chief wants to see you," he said. "Now." Annie's heart pounded as she followed the security chief through the darkened corridors of the mansion. Had she been discovered? Was she walking to her death? Her mind raced, calculating escape routes, weapons she might use, words that might save her. The security chief led her to Chief Udu's private study. He knocked once, then opened the door, motioning for her to enter. Chief Udu sat behind his desk, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Leave us," he said to his security chief, who nodded and closed the door behind him. For a long moment, Chief Udu said nothing, merely studied her face. Annie forced herself to maintain eye contact, to keep her breathing steady. "Annie," he said finally, his voice soft. "Or should I call you by another name?" Her mouth went dry. I don't understand. He smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. I think you do. I've been suspicious from the start. Too perfect, too interested, too everything. He pushed a folder across the desk toward her. My men have been watching you. The late night calls. The unexplained absences. The way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. Annie's mind raced. The room seemed to spin around her. Was this the end? But you know what? Chief Udu continued, leaning back in his chair. I don't care. I like you, Annie. Whatever your game is, I'm willing to overlook it, if you're willing to be honest with me now. It was a trap. It had to be. But in that moment, Annie saw her opportunity. Her only chance. You're right, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I haven't been entirely truthful. I'm not just here for business. She leaned forward, holding his gaze. I'm here because I've heard rumors about who you really are. About what you did in Nigeria. Chief Udu's expression darkened. And Annie took a deep breath. It excited me. Power like that, it's intoxicating. She reached across the desk, taking his hand in hers. I want to be part of it. All of it. For a terrible moment, she thought he would see through her lie. Then his expression shifted, ego overcoming caution yet again. His hand tightened around hers. I knew there was something special about you, he said, his voice low. Something that understood the depth of what I am. That night, as Chief Udu slept beside her, Annie sent one final message to Ojo, tomorrow. Dawn. The arrest was planned with military precision. International police, working with Nigerian and Ghanaian authorities, surrounded Chief Udu's estate in the early hours of the morning. They moved silently, cutting power to the compound, disabling the security systems, and entering through points identified by Annie during her time inside. Chief Udu was still asleep when they burst into his bedroom, a look of confusion turning to horror as he realized what was happening. His eyes found Annie, standing in the doorway, all pretense of admiration gone from her face. You, he whispered, understanding dawning. You betrayed me. Annie stepped forward, removing the locket from around her neck and opening it to reveal a photograph. Do you recognize him? My brother. He ate at your Suya spot the day before he disappeared. Her voice, which had been gentle and admiring for months, now cut like a blade. I wanted you to know who brought you down. Chief Udu lunged toward her with a roar of rage, but the officers restrained him. As they dragged him away, he screamed threats and promises of revenge that echoed through the mansion. Once he was gone, Annie sank to her knees, 3 months of fear and pretense finally overwhelming her. Ojo, who had arrived with the police, knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. It's over, he said softly. We did it. Chief Udu's extradition to Nigeria was swift, his trial even swifter. The evidence Annie had gathered was overwhelming, not just for his crimes 5 years ago but for the corruption and bribery that had allowed him to escape justice for so long. The courtroom was packed each day of the trial. Families of victims, media, and curious onlookers all came to see the fall of the man who had evaded justice for so long. Annie and Ojo sat in the front row, their faces solemn as they watched the process unfold. When the judge delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts, and sentenced Chief Udu to life imprisonment, a collective exhale seemed to pass through the courtroom. Some cried. Some cheered. Annie and Ojo simply sat, hand in hand, feeling the weight of 5 years of grief and pursuit finally begin to lift. As Chief Udu was led away to begin his life sentence, few gave thought to what awaited him inside those prison walls. Justice had been served, the monster had been caged, and for most, that was enough. For Malam Osman, sitting in his own cell miles away in the same prison system, the news of Chief Udu's capture and conviction came as a whisper among inmates, a rumor that spread like wildfire. At first, he didn't believe it. After 5 years, he had given up hope that the man who had led him down the path of destruction would ever face justice. But when a guard confirmed the rumors, Malam Osman sat alone on his bunk, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. Relief, vindication, and something else, a question that kept him awake that night: what would happen when they inevitably crossed paths? In the 5 years since his imprisonment, Malam Osman had undergone a transformation that shocked even himself. His redemption had begun with remorse, grown through the guidance of Pastor Emmanuel, and culminated in actions that had earned him respect even within the harsh world of prison. He had become a mentor to younger inmates, helping them find paths to redemption of their own. He had started a literacy program, teaching prisoners to read and write. He had even saved the life of a guard during a riot, an act that had earned him privileges few inmates enjoyed. Malam Osman had risen through the informal ranks of prison society to become a leader, a man whose word carried weight not through fear but through respect. The once ambitious gateman who had dreamed of wealth and status had found something more valuable: purpose. Meanwhile, Annie and Ojo stood at the gates of the prison, watching as Chief Udu disappeared inside. The weight of their 5-year quest should have lifted, but instead, a strange emptiness took its place. "What now?" Annie asked softly. "When you've spent so long chasing justice, what comes after?" Ojo had no answer. They had both defined themselves for so long by their pursuit of Chief Udu that his capture left a void neither knew how to fill. What does this story teach us? It reminds us that greed is a poison that corrupts the soul, that power without compassion leads only to destruction. It shows us that no matter how far we run, the consequences of our actions will find us. It tells us that justice, though sometimes slow, is relentless in its pursuit. But perhaps most importantly, it speaks to us of redemption, not as an easy path, not as a way to escape consequences, but as a journey that begins with facing the truth of what we have done and accepting responsibility for the harm we have caused. Ask yourselves, my friends, what price would you pay for wealth and power? How far would you stray from your values in pursuit of status and respect? And if you found yourself lost in darkness, would you have the courage to seek the light again? The story of Malam Osman and Chief Udu is not just a cautionary tale, it is a call to examine our own hearts, to question our own motivations, and to choose our paths with care. For in the end, we are defined not by our worst mistakes but by how we respond to them, not by our falls but by our willingness to rise again. My dear friends, this story has touched your hearts, has made you think, has perhaps even made you question some of your own choices. Do not keep its lessons to yourself. Share this tale with your loved ones, with your children, with anyone whose path might be made clearer by its wisdom. Leave a comment below sharing what this story means to you. Which character do you relate to most? What lessons will you carry forward? Your thoughts matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. Subscribe to our channel to journey with us through more tales that will challenge your mind, touch your heart, and perhaps change the way you see the world. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might be exactly what you need to hear at exactly the right moment. And remember, just as Chief Udu was ultimately held accountable for his actions, and just as Malam Osman found a way to create meaning from his suffering, we too must take responsibility for the paths we choose and the impact we have on others. Until next time, my friends. May your choices bring you peace, not regret. May your ambitions be tempered by compassion. And may you find the courage to seek redemption when you have strayed from your true path.